to Geek Out Weekly, the podcast where we geek out about something on a weekly basis, not so strongly. Um,
Getting tighter.
One day we'll find a tagline.
It's getting tighter. It's getting tighter.
Yeah, I think maybe cut the weekly basis, but I like. But anyway, and this week we're talking about the brand new film out this past week, 2021's Psycho Goreman. So first off, did you enjoy the film, Ben?
I did enjoy it.
Okay, cool. Well, this has been Geek Out Weekly for yet one more week.
Um, yes, I did enjoy it, but there are so many parts of it I also disliked,
Interesting.
which actually will
Yeah,
touch
we'll
on
get into it.
various
I just wanted to.
elements. But yes,
I'm
overall, I enjoyed it. What about yourself?
yeah, I really liked it.
Okay,
I also got the opportunity to watch it with two of my housemates who also
nice. Okay,
are bad movies, bad 80s movies, and horror fans, which I think is the ideal
yes.
environment. Is a group watch with people who are also in it for those types of things, and they
Uh-huh.
didn't know anything about them. And like my newest housemate, Ben, who brought a VHS collection.
Mm.
Um, of old school horror and sci-fi movies. Had never heard of it and didn't know what to
Right.
expect and was like blown away by it because so it's basically for those who don't know, it is a Jesus Christ phone. Try and mute it from things and it does the opposite. There we go. By that I mean I don't know how to push buttons on a thing. Yeah, so it's a modern movie, but it's sort of told in vaguely, like the setting is vaguely 80s middle
Mhm.
America. It is all practical effects. So all the monsters and stuff are, people in suits, and it's quite over the top gory.
Mhm.
And it's very self aware of the genre in a way that isn't parody, I would
Yep.
say.
Yep.
It toes the line really well between um, subverting tropes and using them for the necessary use of them in the genre that you're in.
Yep.
That's basically it. So for me, my first question I had was, what's your experience, sort of history with this type of movie? Because I think that will shape one's experience with the film.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I grew up, I suppose, from sort of an early teen, from an early teen age, with kind of like horror films and that sort of stuff. Getting in through something like X-Files, I suppose. But leaning a bit more, I suppose, from the B movies more into sort of the Hollywood level films, or at least what the 80s Hollywood level films were. So lots of things like Hellraiser, Candyman, Freddy films, Jason films, all of those sorts of things, which kind of have a very special sort of place where they're not quite big budget movies, but they're not quite B movies. And
Yeah,
I've seen a few of the lower budget kind of films, but more of my experience is with those, those 80s, early 90s as well, kind of horror films before they make the leap into the bigger productions like Scream and stuff like that.
right.
But yeah, watched a lot of that as an early teenager.
Yeah, fair. I think I'm probably in the middle. Because sorry, I've distracted myself. What I'm trying to say. Oh, so I've seen a lot of B movies.
Uh-huh.
I watched a lot on cable growing up in Canada. I didn't really like gore, or didn't really get into horror until later. So like the sort of Hollywood-sized Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street,
Mhm.
Friday the 13th. Didn't really get into. I've only seen a handful of those. Even Hellraiser and stuff was until like university. So it's catching
Okay.
them on like resurgency that happened in the early mid 2000s of
Mm.
like people wanting sharing them. Maybe just sequels came out and I had some horror fans. But bad sci-fi, B-movie sci-fi is a thing I saw a lot of, and so then there's obviously a lot of shared tropes with this because it's like a horror sci-fi, and
Yep.
so I really enjoyed the tropes that I recognized from horror, but like found the tropes from also yeah, the sci-fi films, especially like Flight of the Navigator and Mac and Me and all these like the kids meet an alien and
Yep.
make friends movies that are also being played with in the middle of this horror movie. And those just got me because that it was like my youth bread and butter type movie. Watching with like going to the video store and what could we all agree on? Me and my two older sisters, right? Um, so yeah, so I found that those parts spoke more to me, and then the over the top gore stuff I never watched in these types of movies, but I can appreciate it because it's silly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of where I sit with.
Okay.
Uh, so I was less so than both of my housemates who we watched the movie together.
Right.
Okay, so I guess it's not really worth going beat by beat. There's a few beats that are I think I want to acknowledge. Do you have anything specific you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, there's I suppose it will come up as we kind of discuss the movie, but certain kind of characters and scenes which I really enjoyed, certain effects which I thought worked very well, and then the opposite, certain characters which I absolutely detested, and certain ways that the story went, which I really liked, and some which I didn't like so much. But yeah, I suppose maybe not beat by beat, but as we discuss it, these things will invariably come out because I need to get them out.
Yeah, good. Well, so why don't I'll lead, but it's going to be very loose. So if you have a thing you want to jump to,
Sure.
Just let that happen. I think first of all, the opener is so classic 80s 70s sci-fi with the scrolling pseudo gothic text that's telling this epic generic space fantasy story about this big evil who was conquered and then trapped, blah. And then it cuts to two kids that are already muddy
Yes.
playing crazy ball.
Yeah, not quite dodgeball.
It's their obvious homebrew version of dodgeball that is like iterated over time. It's like kind of like Calvin Ball and Calvin and Hobbes, but it's also that trope is because latchkey kids, nothing to do.
Yep.
Only so much TV time allowed. You didn't have anything else, so you made up dumb games. And then because you were siblings and you played the dumb games over and over, they got weirder and weirder.
I think that may be bringing me up my first dislike. A lot of the characters are over the top, of course. They're hammed up. Not even hammed up. They're just very kind of extreme.
They're the 100% trope.
The roles. Yeah, absolutely. They're that, and I think that's my problem. They're 100% trope, rather than it being a nicer balance. The two kids are just too extreme for me. I think they're just too much. If it was dialed back just that little bit, so you can get why you want the girl to be, she comes across as a bit more aggressive, and the
a bit more.
Yes, okay, very aggressive, but that works well with the story that she is the dominant kind of sibling, and she is kind of a little bit out there and nuts. But the brother's just so wet, isn't he? And I can see why he would be more subservient to his sister, but it was just such a unbalanced kind of relationship, I suppose. And yeah, 100% trope is definitely the issue I have with those two characters being the two main characters, really, as well.
I think so. There's a part where when I first watched it, I was like, really? Near the end, which we'll get to, but I'll save that just in case people want to. End stuff can be spoiler chatted about later, maybe, who knows? But I think it's actually think it's stronger as being dumb trope that you can just like let wash over you
Yeah.
in a sense for what it's doing. I think it, because it starts subverting in very weird ways.
Mm.
I think it needs that like generic audience buy-in of these are the tropey characters. Well, if they had nuance, then you'd have to deal with some of the weirder subversions in a more
Mm.
nuanced way.
Mm.
But I totally get like so Mimi fucking sucks.
Yep.
Sucks the whole movie. Doesn't get redeemed. Just sucks. Uh, and what I like about the Mimi as the trope is that she is the little sister.
Yes.
So what they do, like you said, so there is the two siblings. One's a wet blanket made out of paper towels, and the other is the super aggressive. I always win. My parents can't control me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a brat, and when my parents ask me to be nice to my sibling, I say fuck that. They should just be better. Get good.
Yep.
And they've inverted that by being not only like you invert it on the age spectrum, the gender spectrum, and even the size spectrum. Like she is small, she is weak, like she's just small, and like she's quite a skinny actress. She's like a 2 to 4 years younger than Luke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But just owns him consistently, and like the permissive dad that lets it happen, the flabbergasted mom. Again, we'll get to their characters in a bit, but like Mimi and Luke are just so stereotypically the trope, but personality, it's the inverse. Like it is the young sister, and there is this wet blanket who's sad and beat up on, but it's the wrong one.
Yep.
And that I appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. That twist to that element was good to see. Definitely. Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that that trope character is annoying as hell, and you don't want them in a movie because they're not really a protagonist.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
Right? Like, that's the tension the film gets instead.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally get it. And boy, does the film... So I think the film, by not having a redemption, really, for her, I think it's stronger for what it's trying to do, but it doesn't make you like that character at all.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But you're supposed to not like that character. It's also kind of true. Oh, I'm going to the end again. So Luke, similar. He kind of grows a spine ish, but it's so
slightly
wet. Yeah.
It might just grow in a different angle instead. It doesn't go up.
So yeah. So they okay. The other thing in the opening I wanted to touch on, just check my notes, is I really like the cuts from... So in the Calvin Ball, they've got this like hardcore rock music, in Crazy Ball, sorry, and then they have this one scene where they cut from the close-ups of action movies with slow-mos and jumping to them like a really far wide shot, which makes it look like the kids are literally just kids throwing balls.
Yeah,
and kind of
they cut the music off.
And they're cutting the music off to remind you that the music is not diegetic, that they're just kids in like the light rain in mud, poorly throwing balls at each other.
Yeah, that's clever.
So good. And they do it a couple other times. This is one of the things I really like about the direction, is there's a few other scenes in the movie where they cut the music between. It's like hardcore music, and they cut it just to remind the audience this is how dumb it is. This thing is very dumb, and if you didn't have the music, it would be very dumb looking. And they, like, again, cinematically also cut to a weirder shot for those, and like they only do it 2 or 3 times, so it doesn't outstay its welcome, but it shows just how smart and how well thought out the movie is. Like, the writer director clearly knows this genre very well and knows what makes it work, such that he can show it to you while still not collapsing it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the non-diegetic music was one of my favorite things that got me immediately invested in the film. I was like, oh, I see, because I had only seen the trailer, which is could just be a generic one of these movies.
Absolutely, yeah.
With some humor, being him called Psycho Goreman. So anyway, the kids find. So Mimi wins Crazy Ball and makes her brother dig a random hole, and then they find a weird glowing pink stone. They awkwardly ask their parents about monsters as bad foreshadowing that feels really forced and overwritten, and then you realize the movie is doing that on purpose because that's what movies used to do.
Yep.
And then Psycho Goreman escapes, right?
Yeah, he's entombed in their back garden essentially, and
Yes.
this gem that Mimi pulls out from its whatever it's held in unleashes him, I suppose. But he wasn't buried that far down, was he? For the big evil of the universe,
again,
he was
I think
buried
that's
like
playing...
6 foot down in someone's back garden.
Yeah, so like to fast forward, we find out through different scenes, like the like Doctor Who collection of random alien species who are in this war room, being like, "Oh no, how do we stop the big bad?"
Some of which look absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, they're so good. It's
Yeah.
clearly like a, hey, practical effects people, make us the most batshit things.
Yep.
But also some of them are clear tropes as well.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
you've got the brain in the vat dude.
Yeah, I mean I think that's my favorite. He's
It
like
was
sort
my
of a
favorite
robot with his sort of. It's not even a brain. It's kind of a whole head with eyes, and then this big brain kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like no skull, and it just looks really good. Especially when through some of the scenes they are a little bit of the kind of comic relief as well for a lot of the time, and you get to kind of some of the scenes towards the end of the movie, and whilst that character doesn't talk, there are things where they want to shield him, so the one next to him tries to put his hand up over his eyes.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
It's just the idea that this weird brain thing is like so like weak and like needs to be protected from visuals, even though it's a clearly alien representative on this council. It's
Yep.
like, oh no, don't worry. It's just
You
so
don't have
dumb,
eyelids.
but...
You can't shut your eyes. Don't watch.
Exactly right. Yeah. So they reveal that some number of years ago they buried him, never to be found or freed.
Mm-hmm.
Yet he's like 2 meters below the surface.
Yeah.
Of this backyard, and with that, like, so when the stone is stuck there, and there's like 4 or 6 little like bits of stone you can push that like move down, and Mimi literally does eeny meeny miny mo going around, and it unlocks, and then later on they're like, I don't know how he could have escaped. Like it was the most encrypted. Like no one could have guessed that encrypted.
They must be
pattern.
so intelligent.
Yeah, and it's like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It's like, which again is like a throwaway joke if you happen to pay attention, was really good, but doesn't interrupt the flow if you don't. Yeah, so then he escapes and he finds some generic crooks who robbed an old man, I guess, and then he gores. Like that's the first real shot of gore.
What does he do? So the first 2 guys, he makes their heads explode. Kind of rips their heads off and drags them towards him. So it's kind of an essence of showing his power, and it's a ridiculous scene, and it's a very tropey scene, because the crook is there going, hey, do one, blah 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 blah, we'll kill you or whatever, and there's this great hulking monster like as a shadow in the doorway, and you can very clearly see that's not a man. That's just a giant alien, clearly, through his little shoulder pads, and the spikes all over him and things like this. But it leans into that trope of these like crooks that are, I don't know, so methed up. The scene where Psycho Goreman shows his power, and I can't remember what he calls himself. Psycho Goreman is a name that the kids give him. Is he like the Archduke of Nightmares or something like that? But he essentially goes in and rips these 3 guys to pieces. And one of them, he puts them in this sort of perpetual state of pain, I guess, just to show how horrible he is, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a good show off of his power, you're right, and also a good show off of like where the gore is going to be. Right, so you have these like blood fountains off of the ripped heads, and also ripping arms, and then the like complete massacre of the one he lets live, like where he's all like half belted, which I thought was really good. It sort of set the tone. And I like that it was sort of, that it reminded me of kind of like the OG, well, the first two Terminator films, especially, of like just bumping into ruffians and overpowering them. And he just did that because they were in the building he was in.
Yeah.
Question mark. Yeah. So then the kids like basically the family finds the hole and they're like, how very strange, kids. You shouldn't have made the hole. Like, the parents are just dumb as bricks, right?
Yep.
There's no way these kids dug it. They see some claw marks, and the dad's like, I guess a hobo fell in and clawed his way out.
Or a big raccoon, I think the mum says, yeah.
Yeah, and then they do, and then later on they track him down, basically. And Mimi's got the crystal, he's about to kill them, and she says, stop. She thinks just shut up as well. And then he can't even speak, and she realizes that she's controlling him with the pink crystal. That's the premise of the film. They control him. Not them. She controls him.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So then, but they still have their lives, which I really like. It reminds me of E.T. a bit, right? Where you have to leave them alone. So they're like, and she's just like, you sit there. Don't do anything until we get back.
Yeah. And then they obviously they do go back. They take him some magazines and bring him a TV, and there's again sort of the tropey dialogue, like, oh, we didn't bring you any pornos, and he's like, why would I want to look at half naked women? She's like, why wouldn't you want to look? He's like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, it's such a good line. And there's a callback to it later when there's a fight in that same like disused shoe factory. Or not my hunky boys, because his magazines are in jeopardy, and it's like, that's very stupid, but it's a very well timed comedic callback.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, we're not gonna go beat by beat, but they basically like make friends with him, but still have to run their lives. So they go to school. They do the standard thing of bringing their random friend in. Alistair is this, blonde kid who looks like in between their ages, but it's hard to tell because growth spurts, whatever.
Yeah.
And Alistair is, she clearly has a crush on him and doesn't know how to deal with having a crush because she's this ultra aggressive girl, as well as just that time of life is difficult. So Alistair comes over for dinner. This is where I think we get into just how tropey those parents are, because the dad was supposed to, they all voted the dad to fill in the hole, and then he like jammed his wrist on the first dig and says, oh, I can't do it anymore. So then the mom has to do all the work, so then he has to cook dinner, and it turns out he microwaved chicken and steamed broccoli, I think. Possibly microwaved. And like is super proud of his terrible rubbery meal, and no one wants to eat it.
Yep.
But you get a sense of them immediately as like a very tropey couple, and it's probably a good time to talk about their relationship. What did you think of them?
I liked the two characters. The dad is this massive kind of caricature, and they keep alluding to things with him. So him going to like the Gulf War and saying that he was a soldier, and then the mum like, you've never fired a gun, and then and other things where she says, look at what you've done to the kitchen. And he says, I think my family would thank me for a meal, rather than taking any responsibility whatsoever.
Oh, he is 100% the worst. He is like such a reward me for doing my part in the family trope. Like, the bar for men is so low, it's a tavern in Hades, is like this man.
Absolutely. And I think the mum kind of has been putting up with it and dealing with it as much as she can, and kind of she has a point where she snaps in the movie, which leads later on to a part which we haven't discussed yet, where one of the council, the paladins,
No,
Templars.
Paladins were his people. The Templars are the people we find out subjugated his people,
Right.
for their religious zealotry sort of thing.
So one of the Templars comes down. The main Templar comes down to Earth to get him, and then turns the mum into this pseudo-Templar, and I think that's a really cool kind of arc for that character. It works very well with kind of the way that she started to not want the kind of, not the life that she has, but just want her husband not to be a complete cunt. She sort of takes that side of being more on like justice and thinking that is the right side of this after she's watched her kids play with this alien bad being who has caused absolute carnage everywhere, or is causing carnage.
But I think so. One thing we sort of skipped was the backstory he gave them, which every time he tries to go to backstory, the kids are like, boring.
Yeah,
like
that's
80s
brilliant.
attention
It's
span,
brilliant,
which I love because you don't get bogged down in like Captain Exposition, because it's like, see, we have thought about this terrible exposition. We're going to make fun of that trope, but also not actually make you endure the whole trope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Am I the purple thing?
Yes, you are the purple thing. Yes.
Cool stories. Where were we? Oh man.
A bit. We're a bit like this film.
Oh yeah, a little all over the place. Well done, Ben. Yeah. So, right. So the backstory is we find out that his people were persecuted by these Templars, who are evil religious zealots, and we get this notion of he wasn't necessarily all evil that the scroll had us believe. Like, even the scroll text at the beginning was like unreliable narrator, because he wasn't the world's worst evil. He became corrupt with the power, but he actually freed his people first from like subjugation. We also find out. Go on.
No, I was going to say it's only then through the corruption of the stone that he then just thirsted for destruction and blood.
Revenge, essentially.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. It was an interesting little thing, which again plays into our notions of like, it's like, oh well, we can do this other trope too, the sort of galactic civil war type thing where neither side is good.
Yeah,
he's just very violent, but we see that she is also very violent. Like, she travels to Earth, but like in that scene of we need to kill him, she like summons a human into their little Doctor Who war room, and then immediately crushes her into a cube, which like pulsates because it's still alive, which she smashes on the table, and then just wipes across her face, and that allows her to take the human form of this person. And I was like, shit. And it's just clearly like we can do all this nonsense stuff that doesn't really make sense, but it really hammers it home when it's not like, I will eat this and become it, which is a kind of a trope. It's like, I'll just kind of destroy it for fun and like wipe the blood on my face. It's like, oh, did you just eat a DNA? Like, if you try and think about it, it makes no sense, but it's like, oh, these scenes never make sense. And it's just like that, putting a hat on it of like, yeah, this is how dumb these things are. So we don't even like, we are pointing out how this doesn't need to make sense. Yeah, and so we also have a scene where she's so then the big thing with Alistair, of course, is Alistair's playing video games with Luke, and Mimi wanted to hang out and doesn't like video games because she's like the more physical, aggressive type child. She then summons Psycho Goreman to solve her problems, and that's when Luke notices, comes out to the field, and she's like, I want Luke to play with me, essentially, right? And he's like, I can do the thing that helped me woo the blah 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 blah. And his solution was to do what, Ben?
He turned Alistair into a giant brain that has little tentacles and eyes on the front of the brain.
Big blue cow eyes, I would say. Just giant, wide-eyed.
It was one of those kind of like, I don't think I like this, but I know why they're doing it kind of moments.
And then that's when the mom sees Psycho Goreman, and like both the mom runs out saying, "Get away from my kid," uh, and
And the dad
with
comes
the
out.
bat.
The dad comes out because he doesn't want her using the bat.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So she smacks him with the bat. It cracks, and you hear the dad right behind her going, "Not my lucky bat."
Mm.
Which again, I really liked, but also the fact that they both jumped over the blob.
Yeah, over the brain, over that Alistair brain. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah, we like. I thought the trope was gonna be, oh, she saw the brain thing and panicked and attacked it, but they're like, nah.
Yep. Yeah, it's very good that they almost bring him in as this kind of, very sideline character, and he is treated like that continuously through the film. Oh, you've gone completely.
Yeah, I
Hey,
thought I fixed it, but I didn't.
yeah, yeah. They maintain that he is just this, very sideline character. He
What
kind
I
of
like
comes
is,
and goes in various scenes.
yeah, what I like is that they don't, they skip all the like trying to undo things
Yep.
parts of these movies. Like, oh no, this bad thing happened. How do we fix it? It's like, nah, Alistair's just a brain now,
Yeah.
and she doesn't even. There's no immediate like, oh, that's not what I wanted. It's like, okay, you did that,
Mm-hmm.
and then Alistair's still like, I'm gonna go home.
Yep.
And then there's this lovely sad walk, and you can see that it's like a shell that someone is in crawling on the ground, and it was one of the funniest things, just because you could see the like awkward crawling
Mm-hmm.
motion of them clearly like dragging their knees as it like bumbled along. Oh, you can't see my hands. It like the shell raising and dropping, just like you're like, yeah, that is someone underneath a like papier-mâché like thing.
Mm-hmm.
Really fucking enjoyed it. Yeah, so basically we then have the mom and dad have their own beef. Luke and Mimi have their own beef. Angel Thingy and Goreman have their own beef. And then we have the first real fight scene, which is so they bring a TV for Psycho Goreman, and he's like, it uses electricity, and in the very again, Captain Sci-Fi exposition is just like, right, so it has electricity, so I can use it to contact my home planet. and he contacts his old paladins, his right hand peoples. Yeah, he contacts them and says, come save me. You need to kill these kids because I can't because of the gem. And so when they're all traipsing around, they also, so he does that. Then the kids are trying to teach Alistair Brain and Psycho Goreman, who is in this lovely like red ascot, like
Yep,
business casual
the image
cowboy
people
hat.
the image people will be seeing now. Yes.
Yeah, that outfit, and trying to teach them the rules of Crazy Ball when two cops come to confront them. And Psycho Goreman, man, does he ever take out that first cop?
Yeah. Just grabs his gun and then melts him.
Not quite though. He grabs the gun and then like tendrils come out and
Yeah,
then bind the gun into him, and then the tendrils turn the guy into like a melty monster who's now on their side.
And
I
it all
guess.
looks like he's
Question mark.
been boiled. He's been dropped in a vat of acid, and rather than coming out as the Joker, he has come out as a human probably would.
Yeah, kind of like the dude in RoboCop. Emil, when the toxic waste hits him.
Yeah. Or Quato from Total Recall.
Good old Quato. Yeah. So that's most of it.
Yeah, and
so-
as you were saying, sort of as they when he called his paladins, that's kind of the first fight scene. His paladins decide that actually they like the position they're in now and want him to be dead and gone, so they can just go and rule, take it in turns in the small democracy that they've actually created on this moon that they now live on.
Right. So they got the fifth moon of Gygax, the planet, as part of their deal to betray what's his name.
Yes.
The
Archduke of Nightmares.
Yes. Wow, Psycho Goreman.
Yeah.
Come on what I really liked about that is the description that they take turns being leader.
Yeah.
Like it's a democracy. Just needless but so joyful. Yeah, and then he's ready to kill them all, but because he had ordered them to kill the kids, Mimi's like, you can't fight back with her with the crystal. And so he's just getting owned. And then finally she makes him apologize. And like, so I guess that's the other trope that's going on as they like he's like, what is love? What is apology? Like you need to have a sincere apology. And so he apparently apologizes enough, then kicks their asses. And then immediately and then two very funny things happen. At the end, he's like the last warrior of them as he beats up again, these are all tropey warriors. There's like a Japanese witch, there's like a tentacle Medusa type thing. There's a robot who is like straight out of Doctor Who because it's like Cassius bot with like very brushed, like very pretty robot made to look like ancient Greek thing. And of course Cassius, I had to look this up because I couldn't quite remember. Cassius and Brutus are the two people who betrayed Caesar, and so when he makes a joke of "I didn't expect any of you to betray me, except maybe you, Cassius,"
Yes.
yeah, like I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a Julius Caesar joke, or is it another one? Yeah, but so he then goes, "You fought well, so I will give you a warrior's death." And a warrior's death is if he had mentioned earlier in the film is you get eaten, and then the most hilariously grotesque part of the film happens, which is he opens his mouth and it like full on billows out like a giant tent, and he drags the guy in, munching him as like blood and gore spits out. It was literally and figuratively jaw-dropping.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, just playing with that like ancient codes of honor type thing, but also just how dumb and gory can we make this? But then immediately after he does that, there's no pause. He then goes, "Ugh!" And Mimi's like, "What's wrong?" He goes, "I'm dying." You're like, "What?"
Something about they've used his own poisoned blood against him because they put it on their weapons or something like that. They basically poisoned him by slashing him with their weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, again, another weird trope, right? Like, oh, my blood used the wrong way is my weakness, kind of thing. Yeah, so that was the big fight scene. It's also the most fighty of the fight scenes, except for the ish finale. So then we fast forward, and the family has like basically, so they call the dad, and the dad picks them up. And then they drive home. The best part about the dad at this point is how often he uses his sprained wrist.
Yes.
Like there's sorry, we forgot the goddamn montage, the song montage of the band.
Oh yeah, that was randomly thrown in, wasn't it?
Yeah, and again, that's with the more of an '80s trope thing than I think a horror trope thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why that's why this movie landed more for me, was because of all the other '80s like. Between the Spielberg-y tropes and the sci-fi tropes, and then the montage, and they even had have a clothing montage in the middle of the song, and they do like the very like sitcom riffs that were all in movies, making fun of like in the doorway watching the dad eat the cookies, steal the cookies from the bake sale, and then his Goreman like just walks in, closes his eyes, and then his hands come out of the Tupperware, and the actor must have had such a fun time pretending to be like grabbed as he's literally holding the prop to his face, pretending he's trying to rip it off, and like running around and cookies falling everywhere. So basically we have this big confrontation, and Psycho Goreman is sick and he needs the crystal to live. Basically, the only way to cure the poison is crystal. We find out Luke took the crystal from Mimi, and then we have the sides, right? It's Mimi and Mimi and Goreman and Dad, and Susan the mom, and Luke and the Templar. And she's about to kill him, and he's like, "No, I will. You know, if you had any honor, you would let me die in combat." And then she's like, "Fine." And Mimi,
he's like, I'm allowed to sort of suggest the challenge that we have to take, and then he lets Mimi decide the challenge instead.
Which we all saw coming, right?
Yes.
And Mimi chooses
Crazy Ball.
Yeah, which
More
means
crazy.
we have another moment where Crazy Balls explained like the umpteenth time.
Where have you gone?
What?
You've gone very far away.
Have I?
You did, yes.
No, my mic technology is just busted today. I'll have to reboot or something. Just annoying.
Yes, so she kind of goes through the rules of Crazy Ball again, tries to explain it to everybody. Obviously, the Templar struggles with this, and as you see through the montage of them playing Crazy Ball, the Templar's the one that's currently getting like hit the most and losing the most from everyone. But somehow it still ends up at 66 points each, and to win you've got to get 67 points.
Yes, but there is the only one of the only rules we know is the switcheroo rule, which is if two balls connect in midair, then the two people who threw the balls, whoever punches the other person first gets all the other person's points +1.
Yep.
So basically, if you're halfway through the game and the balls impact each other, someone wins.
Yeah.
And Mimi always runs and punches. And so that's what happens. But then the Templars basically, well, this is preposterous. I'm just going to kill you.
Yeah.
Which you're like, so that was all pointless. It did let the various people work out some aggression, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And
then she then the Templar takes the power away from the mum, from Susan, doesn't she? Turns her back into herself from being robot kind of Susan.
Yeah, and basically they're all in trouble, and Psycho Goreman's like, Mimi, you need to give me the stone. And she's like, only if you... Right, so they had already agreed that if she gave him the stone, she would save the family. And there's even a moment where the dad goes, and everyone else on Earth, right? She's like, you kind of missed that. She's like, yeah, I did. And then they carry on.
Yep.
But yeah, so then basically Luke, after confronting her earlier and being like, you know, I've got my spine, is like, I'm not sure. You've always been mean to me. She's like, give me the stone so we can save Psycho Goreman. And this is the point in the movie which like doubles down on the tropes, right? Because you expect her to apologize, and instead she looks at him and she goes, I'm the friggin' best. Yeah. Which is the song that we alluded to in the montage. And then basically everyone starts singing along,
they all join in
to this song in like a cappella that is basically just her hubris and self-centered narcissism. And then Luke smiles and gives her the thing, and it's like, she didn't apologize. You said this. Like, this is so infuriating in the moment, but I liked it better as a subversion of, and then they magically just change their heart, because that doesn't happen in real life.
Yeah.
But boy, was I not ready for that trope inversion. I was like, fucking stupid. God damn it, really? Because again, I think like you, I didn't like her. And so it was annoying that she didn't have any redemption, but also it makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so that so then she like Goremans the Goreman up, and he like can fight, and then we get the last true fight scene, right? Which is pretty except for how so she's got a sword and he makes a sword, which I think is the funniest part of that scene, and the rest is meh.
Yep. Yes, so he makes a sword out of her, and basically
like literally just
attacks her. Rips pieces off her, rips pieces out of her, grabs part of her spine, and it's a very strange sort of scene, because you're like, okay, I get what you're doing. You're making a sword from her, but why bother making a sword? Why not just keep ripping her to pieces? Because obviously you're quicker than she is. So why go toe to toe in sword combat? What's the purpose of that? But also, how is she standing up, having part of her spine ripped out and various parts of her torn off to make this sword? And
also, I thought the whole point is you have all these mental energy powers.
Yeah. So we just we'll just have armed combat between each other instead.
Yeah.
But yes, he beats her, And in what I thought was a nice twist on the earlier scene where you see him eating his enemy, he then eats her and says, "I will give you a warrior's death," and goes down to eat her. And the parents say, "What is going on?" And the kid's like, "You don't want to see this." No, and they take them away, but they also take us away from that as well. So you don't see that happen again, which I thought was quite clever.
Budget saving, clever as well.
Sorry? Budget
saving.
Yes,
Clever,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of, I like a lot of the ideas around, how Psycho Goreman's been built up to this point about being this big bad, but we understand actually he was enslaved, and this is more of a kind of a big revenge thing, and it's gone too far as he's kind of gained and grown in power and those sorts of things. And he makes lots of different people kind of live in an eternal hell by not killing them, but making them, husks of beings in constant pain. And then he's like, "No, you can have a warrior's death." Yeah. It has this like weird code, which doesn't make any sense.
But I think that's the point, right? Is because these things are always like generic alien code.
Oh, absolutely. It is, again, it's part of the trope.
Or spectacle, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so then basically the film's over. The parents, we cut, like, they're all fine. They go home. We see a TV.
They go to the hospital, actually, because the dad's wrist, which he's clearly been faking the entire time, he high-fives Psycho Goreman, and Goreman hits him so hard that he snaps his wrist in half, basically.
Yeah, actually breaks it.
Yeah,
and it's
and actually breaks it.
Well done, like, exposed bone makeup. It's very, very smart. Like, it's his comeuppance, right?
Yeah.
It's like, fake it, get it. Which is odd because no one else seems to get any resolution. But yeah, so I think that's like, I think we've touched a bunch, but the final scene's kind of like a stinger. It's dinner at Alistair's residence, and he's still an Alistair brain thing, and his parents are just dealing with it as we cut to a TV, and Psycho Goreman's killing everyone on TV.
Yeah, I like
that.
It's such a. I like the ticker at the bottom of the TV as well, which comes up and it says something like large dickless purple monster terrorizing the city.
Yeah, it's very good. Cool. Yeah. So, I really enjoyed it. That I was infuriated by characters, but I knew that's what the filmmakers wanted.
Yeah.
We've sort of touched on a bunch. We went more beat by beat than maybe we needed to, but I'm curious, I guess, because like there's so many small moments that I found I really like this movie because of the moments.
Yes.
Like the jelly cube smear thing, which is in such a like fantastical scene of like all kinds of very well done puppets. That type of thing. And then all the like throwaway lines of codes and honor and government and like bigger than the story.
Yes.
But so we sort of only touched on like you really disliked Mimi to the point where it was too much, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Mimi and Luke, which they compound because Psycho Goreman remembers like the parents' names when he says goodbye, but doesn't remember Luke's, and it's like a running gag. He like 3 or 4 times in the film. It's like and he's like Luke, and even one time he's like, "You should know that by now."
Yes. I think there is lots of clever writing in this, and it's edited and shot very, very well to bring those tropes out, to really show off some of the gore some of the time, and to highlight certain characters doing things. But it was generally the characters and the way that they acted and their demeanor, which is what really put a downer on it for me. And there's lots of points in this film where I'm like, that's just stupid. Some of it's stupid good. There's a part towards the beginning where they go to find where they first discover Psycho Goreman in the factory, and Luke knocks over the guy that he's put in this perpetual frozen torment, and he falls backwards and his head like smashes and splatters everywhere, and the kids are sort of like, and Psycho Goreman's pissed, and Luke says sorry to Psycho Goreman, but then the little mouth that's been smashed apart from the head on the floor is like, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's stupid bits which work,
Yeah.
but there's also stupid bits
also-
I'm like, oh,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
and the fights look like something out of Power Rangers, and there's
I mean, that's the point.
I mean, it is, yes.
Yeah.
But there's little bits where I thought, oh, if they'd have just maybe made this a little bit less sort of schlocky, it would have hit a little bit better for me. But
Right.
for some people, it's just pure B movie, and some
Yeah,
people
I
will
was gonna
just
say, it's-
love it.
I think that's the key, is that, like, if you have any beam, like, it's not trying to do anything except an homage, homage to while being a B movie, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a shockingly low budget for this day and age. It's $110,000, I think,
Wow,
which is
nice.
amazing. Yeah, shot in 16 millimeter, which is like traditional B movie stock. But yeah, I think I get you. Like, it's some of those production choices are very bad, and they're knowingly bad while also needing to be bad because there was no budget. But I think if you didn't have that nostalgia for those movies, then it's just bad,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, I hadn't thought. Same thing with some of the writing pieces. It's like if it's a trope, because like I said, it travels through a bunch of different genres, and if some of those tropes aren't what you watched, it's a bad writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned, like certain effect shots, like the only like real CGI like effect I think was when they needed to call for help and they call the dad who's on the toilet, and Psycho Goreman's like glowing face yelling,
Yes.
"Come save me!" And he's like, the dad is so inept. He's on the toilet. He's like, "I don't know where that is," and they're like, It's on this intersection. He's like, I don't know. And then they give him, and the Psycho Goreman pops back again and like gives him directions. But each time he's like thrown off and like falling out of off the toilet, and eventually he's in the bathtub, and it's this like glowing face that yells at him and scares him and says the thing and then disappears, and then he like awkwardly responds to like, I don't know what to do, and then it's like comes back with more information, and they do it 3-ish times,
Yeah.
and it's just enough to know it overstay its welcome. It felt very like trope aware, like early Family Guy, without like again without overstaying its welcome. It's like that same sort of, okay, but what would happen actually in the world if like a glowing face came and told you a thing and you didn't know what to do? You'd be like, what do I do? And they'd have like, you'd have to have an open line of communication to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And then like going the extra 3 steps. I thought it was so well done. I also think that some of the more annoying bits were papered over in my watch because I was watching with people.
Sure. Yeah. You know, you've got someone to, even if it slightly annoys you, you've got someone to riff off of in that moment who might have a different opinion about it and shed some kind of different viewpoint for you to, you know, shift your own a little bit, or to concentrate on something else that's happened instead and discuss other bits.
Or in a slow part of the film, you mention a thing. Like, I can't believe that thing. Or like, so like that bathroom scene, like all 3 of us were just howling at that. Because that's also where the movie really starts to break to absurd rather than just trope subversion. Like, that's where it's like, yeah, we're going to do whatever we want. And it's like, well, actually, it's probably Alistair. It might be that moment.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
It's Alistair and the parents ignoring him, the jumping over him to confront Psycho Goreman. Like, yeah. But it's just so dumb. I mean, I also love bad movies and dumb movies. Like, and so yeah, this really worked for me. I can see why. Like, and I think I'd be curious on second watch if knowing that Mimi never gets redeemed, if that's easier. Or if it's just more annoying. I can't see it being neutral, I think, on a second watch. She's it's also with our discussion, I didn't notice or clock that like the only character who gets redeemed is gets an arc of some sort of consequence is the dad. But it's just the physical break. You get the sense that they're probably going to go into their same shitty self-destructive cycle of resentment
And
and passive aggressive.
and he even the dad is the one that brings up the whole aren't we the monsters? Aren't humans are the monsters? He very like oddly self-aware yet completely ignorant.
Oblivious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when like the fate of the universe is on the line, but he's so butthurt from Susan calling him lazy earlier in the movie that he literally says passive aggressive like, I'd love to help Susan, but I'm just too lazy, or takes a bite or drink or something, and it's just like
when Mimi's with Psycho Gorman and Gorman's wrapped up in all of these blankets because he's injured and she's
Oh,
kind of
God,
like
it's so
wrapped up
good.
like a baby, and the dad's just there like holding the TV which had been which had blood spewing from it because it's the one that Gorman used to communicate with his sort of his generals. The dad's sort of moving the TV around. He's like, "Well, this is busted." And like completely just like so interested in just anything else that's actually happening.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's just like I'm. Yeah, I have my wheelhouse, and I will do whatever I can to stay within it and ignore all the real problems.
Yeah, and it's the only time he ever really gets upset is when the TV breaks as well. Like he curls up in a ball on the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Psycho Goreman basically like hurls a bolt or something, and it like bounces into the room and breaks the TV that he's watching the music video on because that's how montages work.
and singing along to it.
Well, and so I found that shot really interesting because it reminded me that he vaguely had PTSD, but then you're like,
Yes.
did he?
Yes.
Because it felt like a very like, oh shit, his PTSD kicked in because he's like curled into a ball and overreacting to an explosion. But then you're like, he didn't. But Susan said he didn't see combat.
Yeah.
And I like the vagueness of his character. I think I said partway. It was I think one of his most passive aggressive moments. I can't remember where, but I said to my my housemate said he might be one of my favorite dads ever to put on film because he's such a stupid ass trope, like in such a toxically negative but very sadly true in the world man.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, they don't let him get away with it, but they also let him get away with it. Like the family does. The movie didn't. The movie broke his wrist.
Yeah.
The family, like, you get a sense that, like, yep, he's gonna be really proud of his microwave chicken. That, like, oh yeah, quintessential dad scene is like he makes this terrible rubbery chicken. The two boys go to play games, and then Mimi's like, "Can I go?" And Mom's like, "Not until you finish with broccoli." And then Mimi storms out and says, "I'm the champion. Champions don't have to eat broccoli." And then the dad like leans back. He's like, "She finished chicken." And then it cuts to the plate, which has both broccoli and chicken. And Susan's like, "No, she didn't." Like, and then it cuts back to him leaning back, hands behind his head, just smiling wistfully, like obviously in a daydream. And you're like, boy, this man is messed up. He's like, he's never really tuned into the way that their actual world or family.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think. So it sounds like your biggest complaint was that like some of the bits didn't work, and I think that's probably points to the bigger thing, which is because that's mostly trope and subversion of trope. It is like a puzzle piece. Like the narrative isn't anything but a stitching together of tropes. The character is the same way, and so I really liked it. But like I had a sort of more of a nostalgia or recognition of some of the tropes, so that the whole thing like came as a package to me. Like there were a few holes or gaps, but they didn't feel that bad. But I think by pointing out that it's like some of these tropes didn't hit well, or they just felt like empty pieces, that like this is a trope fest, and
absolutely.
it does tell the story and it is interesting, but ultimately I think your mileage may vary depending on how familiar you are with the tropes it's giving and subverting. So yeah, you might like if you don't know B movies, I think this wouldn't be worth watching just because it would just be this strange thing that gets stranger.
Yes, very much. Yeah,
because I think you couldn't. You point like this discussion has helped point out to me that like you can only enjoy the subversion of a trope if you know it's a subversion of a trope. Otherwise, it's just this weird thing, and often subversion comes off as out of left field or dumb.
Absolutely,
and
and,
nuance.
and again, there's moments which we can see as subversions which are just stupid to people who don't know what the story is sort of getting to, and a lot of people will, if they don't know this kind of style of film, will just scratch their head.
Yeah,
the whole way through.
Yeah, the whole. And then if you really take B movies seriously, whatever that means, I think you would not like this because it just exposes tropes, but also uses them in weird ways. But I think it's if you have even if you aren't into horror, if you know B movies, I think it's worth a watch.
Definitely,
for me, I really enjoyed it.
It's just a bit of fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's also like 94 minutes.
Yeah,
like really easy. And I do think if we can scrounge a way to watch this with someone else, that would be the ideal. Even if it's on Discord or something, I think like that would be enough co-watching to help paper over those gaps. Because, like, again, there's some brilliant scenes that you immediately will talk about when the movie's going slow, and I think that helps this type of movie so much.
Definitely.
To not when you're by yourself and you're like, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of time where I watched it here because the family were using the TV downstairs, and I thought, well, they're watching something, I'll come and sit and watch it on a lunchtime.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time when it was on, I kind of sat back and was like, I can kind of not half pay attention, but I've got it on the screen. I can sort of have a look at what the Discord, everyone's kind of chatting in the Discord, what's going on and stuff. And there was some downtime, which I didn't have people to bounce off of to fill. And so, yeah, that's a very, very good point, that this is definitely something to share with someone else.
Yeah, like I remember the first time I watched The Room, I told a friend about it, and he watched it by himself, and he was like, "I don't understand why you think this movie's amazing." I'm like, "Oh, you watched it already?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "When?" He's like, "Oh, yesterday." I was like, "Did you watch it with your partner?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Bet you hated it." Like, it's just it's so much of that as an experience. Because that movie is all awkward pauses where you need to like share with people.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, I think that should cover us for this week. So it sounds like a strong recommend and a light recommend, depending on your familiarity with B movies, etc.
Yes.
And if you can find others who would be down to clown. Cool. Awesome. Well, that's us for the week. You can catch us live usually at noon if you want to watch the recording live with all the technical difficulties that may arise. Oof, what a day.
What an edit it's going to be.
We're also 2/3 of the Tanked Up podcast, which is all about craft beer and video games. We're joined by, of course, the lovely Lucy Yearwood, the strongest of us all.
Absolutely.
I play first looks at games on Tuesdays at noon. Tanked Up records Tuesdays at 8. You play something on Wednesdays. It's your Let's Play lunches. So that whatever you kind of feel like. Sometimes it's a few weeks of the same game. Sometimes it's something random.
Yeah, I think depending on your availability, I think we'll stick to Battlefront 2 again, maybe.
Sounds good to me. Yeah. And Radari plays Insomnia streams 10:30 British time on Fridays. Other than that, where you can find all that content and more, articles, etc., videos, etc., at outoflives.net, on YouTube if you're watching this, or not. If you want to catch us with the video that may or may not show my face, we're YouTube. Just look up Out of Lives Network on YouTube. If you're listening to us as a podcast, please rate, review, share, subscribe, like, follow, on all the things I should say. You can reach us at podcast@outoflives.net. Out of Lives Net on Twitter, Out of Lives Network on Twitch. I'm at the Omniarch, and Ben is at Nova_47. It's not my most elegant outro, but it is an outro.
It is.
That's us for another week. I've been Aadil.
I'm always Ben.
Bye.
See ya.
www.outoflives.net